Hi, my name is Gia Hamilton, and thank you for joining me for Live Your Purpose Artfully, a video series that looks at creatives and innovators who are living, working, and visiting the city of New Orleans. So this feels like a long time coming. I get to sit and talk with Phlegm, New Orleans native and multidisciplinary artist. I have had what I would consider an art crush on you for quite some time. I was really following social media, honestly, when I came across your work, and I was just like really drawn to the images and really drawn to your face and all these different ways that you were thinking about image, these visual language. So I have to back up though, because I am very curious about your name or the pseudonym that you use.
So, long story short, Phlegm is just, I like the way the letters visually look when everything is lowercase. I just like the drop of the P and like the rise of the H, the like hook of the G, and then like the M. As it's purely aesthetic. It sort of ties into my like of science, but for the most part, it was purely just for like, I like the way it looks. The name that I had on Instagram before Phlegm was homophiliac. Yes. Which I made when I was like 21. So most people like knew me when that was a thing. Another name that was just like silly, funny, like 21-year-old stuff. And then I was like 25. And this like face painting sort of like had a life of its own. And I saw my name printed somewhere and I was like, oh, that is not what the feeling that I had when I saw it was the one that I was like, this is not going to work once I'm like older, if this becomes like a real thing. Yeah. Like, it would just be like a joke. And so I had to find something that was like still kind of silly, but also like a little bit more like adult. And so Phlegm is what my mind told me like being an adult was.
I like it.
Exactly. And so I was like, okay, I guess it fits. And then I went through a bunch of, I don't remember many of the names, but I remember I have a sheet of paper somewhere with these names written in boxes in different formats, and Phlegm just kind of
all made sense visually. Yeah. Which honestly kind of speaks to like your work, right? It's like there are a bunch of different elements, and I want you to describe your work, but there are a bunch of different elements, and separate, I think they would make sense, but together there is this like kind of visual cohesion that is super interesting. But like, how do you describe your work? If you were describing it to someone who hadn't seen it yet,
I guess I would just describe it as sort of the practice of African face paint, but then sort of like push through the sort of like meat grinder lens of a kid who like grew up on the internet and like likes horror movies and like science. Okay. And like world cultures kind of all smashed into one. So it's kind of like hoghead cheese of like my interest and like the things I'm into as a 26-year-old like internet kid.
Yeah. Okay. So you got this amalgamation of hoghead cheese. You'll have to look up what hoghead cheese is. I'm not going to tell you, but there's something delightful about it. It's also a mystery.
Yeah. Just like hoghead cheese.
Right. And you don't quite know what's in it, and you kind of don't want to know, but you're curious still. So when I first saw your work, it was actually, like I said, on the internet, but what I connected, especially after I learned that you were a New Orleans native, was black masking Indian tradition here. And I mean, I definitely connected it to the diaspora, but I kind of localized it a little bit. Do you have a specific relationship, or like what is maybe your relationship to that?
None at all. I was actually asked this Mardi Gras season just passed by someone who was sort of putting together this like hodgepodge Mardi Gras Indian masking tribe, and they wanted me to do it in something, and like something in my spirit said absolutely not. Yeah. And so I just didn't do it. And I don't know much about Mardi Gras Indian masking. I do know that people like it is a like born in, die out kind of thing, that people are very serious about it, and it's not a thing that you just like pop into and pop out of. either you are personally invited into something or you're born into it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't born into it at all. It's not a part of like where my family, we have no ties as far as we know.
Yeah.
To Mardi Gras Indians.
Yeah.
And so the parallels are possibly there, and that could be part of the like hoghead cheese like amalgamation thing, but it's not like I don't consciously reach for those. I appreciate the artistry for what it is, but I do know that for me to learn that, it might be like stepping on toes.
Yeah.
That I'm not trying to step on.
It's so interesting that you talk about like having like that respect for culture, right? And the fact that you're kind of really pushing, right, visually against all sorts of things and pulling things to you.
Right.
When you're conceptualizing what an image is going to be, what are you thinking about? Like, what feels important to you, and how do you make those kind of editorial decisions about what gets inserted and what doesn't?
So the work that because when you saw my work for the first time, I was painting different from the way I paint now. And so those mostly started where I would like sketch them out on my face first and then like fill them in with color and then like go ahead and add pieces, and then it sort of evolved into me like trying to add shading and dimension with like different eyeshadows and like colored powder, and then it sort of turned into what we see now where it's like a white base with like these stark black eyes that sort of do something, and then like the color comes that way. I start with the white base and then my focus is the eyes next, so it depends on like whatever mood I'm feeling. Sometimes lately the eyes have been sort of like drawn back, not sure why. That's just sort of what's happened. They're starting to look more like eyes than I kind of wanted them to, but again, I'm sort of like letting whatever is like
kind of emerge,
doing its thing.
Yeah.
And then after that, the color comes next, and so I just decide which colors do I like, which ones do I want to use. I've been gravitating toward pink and purples a lot lately. Outside of my like in my artwork and in my real life, and I'm trying to also like not fall into like a Pablo Picasso, like the blue
the blue period.
Right. I'm trying not to fall into like a pink purple period, but it's sort of like
but you might.
But it's kind of happening. And so I'm like, all right, if this is what's happening, then I'm just gonna go ahead and take it and run.
Yeah. It's interesting. I like that you referenced this because it gave me an easy in to this question. But you mentioned like your kind of art life and your real life. When you're actually photographing yourself, right? After you've painted and put together what are these very elaborate kind of creations, almost like these visual collages. Do you feel like you're embodying something or someone else, or describe that process, or is it a performative kind of element for you?
I guess a little bit of both. There's this sort of like, the only thing that I can say is that when I am painting them, I'm aware that I'm painting them, but then sometimes it's sort of like, not that but I kind of tune out whatever's going on. I kind of forget what time is and what time is like. And then when I'm done, it's always this exhale, even though I've been breathing the whole time, but I'm always just like, and then I then move into sort of like taking picture mode. So for that, it's more so like capturing what I'm seeing in my brain and visually what I see in person and like trying to get that on film. So that part is more so like technical composition, lines, angles, shapes, colors, like where does this work? How does this look? But yeah, it's just that's sort of where things go. When I'm done and I'm looking at them, outside of like once I wash everything off and I look at them, I know that I made them, but sometimes there's like a separation of like, I see myself in them, but then I don't at the same time. Like
they're abstracted,
me, but then they're not me.
Yeah. Interesting. And so, like, if you think about this practice, but you also think about like contemporary art and other artists who are working, do you tie yourself to any particular lineage or people who you feel like are influences, or people, artists that you're thinking about, or maybe artists that you have thought about that the images that they made feel like they're a part of your story in some way?
I always have this running slideshow, PowerPoint slideshow of Caravaggio's work, Bernini's work, Baroque period work, of just that sort of like high contrast, drama, moody. It's just always sort of like permeating in this sort of like cloud of my like artistic pool, I guess is the best way I can describe it.
Yeah.
There are some things that I'm pulling from currently, but I think those two are the most that I like peel from. I really liked the like graphic nature of Keith Haring's work, and sort of like pop art work of the like 60s was sort of like where I like had my groove, where if I were to ever like, I told myself as a kid, if I ever made art, it would be like pop art. So it would be like posters, like graphics was sort of like where that would.
Yeah.
Which is what most of my work typically is.
Yeah.
It involves like very like, yeah.
I mean, so you said like you're this internet kid, right? So you've had access to the internet, you know, for ever.
Right, forever.
That's so interesting.
Well, I won't say forever. I do remember not having a computer.
Yeah.
And I do remember when we got a computer.
Okay.
I do remember when you had dial-up internet.
Okay.
And I do remember if someone picked the phone up, like the internet was shut out. So I was around for the beginning, but I think I remember having a computer in 3rd grade.
Okay.
And then from 3rd grade on, I was like on the internet.
I'm in amazement here. I remember my first cell phone and like how large it was. I also remember beepers.
Okay, I remember. I never had a beeper, but I do remember them.
You remember them. You remember hearing about them, seeing them. If you're so, you know, talk a little bit about that internet reference, right? Like the having access to so many images, and like how is like social media and Instagram and all of these things like played a part in the development of your practice?
So in terms of the images part, let me back up. I was one of those kids who spent time on the internet sort of like digging through the libraries of whatever's going on. But in terms of looking up art in that sense, that was never a thing that I did until like recent.
Yeah.
But when I was younger on the internet, most of my art references come from the art history class I took in high school, and I took one more in college, which is my only real art school experience. But most of my references to the internet come from like logos and like graphics and sort of just like clean line that's meant to convey some sort of message. And so that really carries into my work of just my goal is for everything to be just like crisp and clean.
Yeah.
Similar to like, I guess if I were to equate it to like a movement in like design, it would be like mid century modern furniture is sort of like these organic lines, also with these like hard angles at the same time. It's sort of like, I guess how I could describe my work.
That's actually a really great. As you were describing it, I literally saw your work.
Yeah,
so that's a really good way to describe it.
That's sort of like that lane that I'm going. Like, just logos.
So this is interesting. Okay, so you're a native of New Orleans, a city that has been, you know, as am I, that has been described a lot of times as like funky.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to reference Zenobia Bailey, the artist, of saying like there's a particular like funky aesthetic to the city. And yet your aesthetic is this cleaner, graphic, right, aesthetic. And you've actually also launched products like a T-shirt.
Yeah.
Yes. I have one of these T-shirts. I wear it. Do you want to talk about it a little bit? Okay.
So much like my artwork, that T-shirt sort of like had a life of its own. It really started as a shirt that I made for myself, where I bought the letters from Walmart and like ironed them onto a shirt. Let me rewind. I won some sort of like a silly joke nightlife award show for the city, and in my like acceptance speech, I mentioned everything you love about New Orleans is because of Black people. And then it kind of like became a thing. I turned into like an iron-on shirt that I wore. At the end of the party, all the letters fell off. I threw the shirt away, and then I happened to get a single picture of it that a friend of mine was actually going to delete. But I was like, no, I like it. I'll just post it.
Right.
You couldn't really read the entire shirt. And then I put it on the internet, and people were like, oh my God, I want one, I want one, I want one. And I was like, oh, y'all, like, this doesn't really exist. And then I wasn't going to make them, and people kept asking, and I was like, if someone else snatches this idea up, I'm going to be so mad. So then I made the shirts, and then that's when they sort of, like, took on a life of their own.
They really did. I remember seeing them in a bunch of different places and just really thinking about, like, I was like, I have to have one of these shirts. Yeah. I now have one. I need to get another one because they're white, and I don't care for my whites as much as I need to. So I'm like, I need just like multiple
to like re-up.
to re-up, exactly. And so like as you think about like your career, which is kind of both rooted in these objects that I've seen that you can wear or have that are really accessible.
Right.
What are you thinking? What is kind of like the dream for you as an artist that you're like, oh man, I really love to do this or have this?
I was talking to a friend of mine about this the other day, and I've pictured my work in a magazine, and that's pretty much about like as far as I've gotten. Maybe selling some sort of like a product, but that's like me just like pipe dreaming, maybe. The real full-on goal, with like everything that I do, including like my internet personality and my social media profile, it's to like help people. Yeah. So in an ideal world, I like to be able to combine all of my like skills and talents and hopes and dreams, and then sort of like throw them in a pot of gumbo and to like make some sort of like helping people achieve their like, I hate saying highest potential because it just sounds really like pretentious and lame, but just sort of like letting people like be your best self. That is entirely what this video series is about, right? Like how do you do this? Optimization, I guess, is like the best way I can describe it.
So what do you feel like you need in order to like achieve that? Like what are some of the things? Because I've been also thinking about this kind of like disruptive retail place, right? That allows for like fun experiments and things like that to happen. What do you think you need?
I am still trying to figure that out. I'm trying to really figure out exactly like what I want to do. My life outside of art is I'm a teacher. And so I really do enjoy teaching. And so my art is really this hobby of mine. But my ultimate goal would be to find a way to sort of like throw them all together. And I'm still sort of figuring out what would that look like. Yeah. Where I can still teach what I want to teach, still do my art, or like find a way to sort of like throw them together.
Yes, I like it. I think that you're going to be able to do it. Thank you. So I just want to thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
My art crush has only been solidified in this conversation, and I actually can't wait to frame. I have two of your pieces, and I actually can't wait to frame them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.